today we're going to be diving into the importance of meditation over medication. For most of my mental health journey, when I started, I was on medication. I tried all the different benzodiazepines, whatever it might be, the SSRIs. And finally, when I just said, okay, I'm going to start to learn how to be mindful and try to live without it as much as best I can, surprisingly, things started to go really well. So I think there's a direct correlation between meditation and mental health, staying sane, happy, peaceful. So why don't we just dive right in as always? Evan, tell us like how you started off on this journey, what meditation means to you, etc.
Yeah, so very similar to you. I suffered from anxiety and depression for most of my life due to some childhood factors and environmental things. There was just a bunch of reasons. It could have been hereditary. I'm not really sure, but that was definitely something that I've always struggled with. And just as you said, tried all the different SSRIs, antidepressants, tried all the medications, went that route. Although it does help temporarily, it kind of puts a Band-Aid on the situation, right?
Right.
So then that kind of, there was still always sort of this underlying pain that I was dealing with. There was always this anxiety, depression. And that's when I started turning to, I started smoking weed when I was about 16. That became a pretty regular thing for me. But still, even with that, I always wanted more. I always wanted something more, just trying to chase more, trying to escape myself, escape the pain. And that's when I started turning to more harder things, prescription pills, so that started around 16 and then all the way until I was 25. I'm not going to get into it too much, but there was a lot of drug use in there. I got really bad with opiates at one point. Wow. Yeah, it was pretty intense. But weed kind of started all of it. I guess it was kind of it wasn't really even about the drugs. It was just about me not being comfortable with myself is what I realize now. And when I was about 26, 27, I guess there was a couple years where I finally was sober. I kind of quit the drugs for the most part. And then when I was about 26, 27 is when I discovered mindfulness. And yeah, it just absolutely changed everything for me. Somebody lent me a book called The Art of Power by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a monk.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it kind of...
He was a monk. He did pass. So we got to
give
a shout out to Thich. Yeah.
But yeah, that was pretty much it. That started this whole holistic journey. And, cool. As you said, I just learned to keep everything very natural. I don't even drink alcohol anymore.
Nice, dude. Hell yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. And this is where we are today. It's been 4 years now.
So. Cool. It's nice to meet a brother. I tell you, I meet a lot of people that don't smoke, but that don't smoke and drink. It's quite rare. So I always appreciate meeting someone in both of those fields. With your weed, so I really want to dive in a little bit to the weed story because this channel is predominantly about marijuana and quitting marijuana. So what was that journey for you? Like, why did you start smoking? When did you start smoking? And then what was your transition out of it? Just the whole gambit.
I was interested in weed from a very young age. Even before I started smoking it, I would see it. So my dad would just let me watch any movies that I wanted. He was really big into films. So from a young age, I was exposed to a lot of things that kids probably shouldn't be. Like I probably shouldn't have even really known what weed was when I was like 10 or 11,
Okay.
So there was just something that always intrigued me about it. So when I finally got the opportunity with a bunch of neighborhood kids that I probably shouldn't have even been hanging out with, I remember it specifically. I think everybody probably remembers the very first time they got high.
Yeah.
Remember I got high, absolutely loved it.
Nice.
And, that was just it. From then on, I just pretty much was a regular weed user for so I was a regular weed user for a few years, but then what happened was, weed actually started giving me some anxiety and I started getting like these very paranoid highs and it was happening very regularly. So I think that's why I started turning to other drugs because I still wanted to get high, but the weed wasn't making me feel good. So I think that's why I started experimenting with the pills and stuff.
Oh, wow. So you fall in one of two camps. Like either people hit that point and they're like, I got to quit, or they kind of go further into the drug use. So the DARE people were not wrong in a sense. I don't know if you remember the DARE group.
Of course. I think about that all the time. I'm like, why didn't they do that shit for a reason? Like we should probably just listen to them.
I wonder though if they're actually like low key trying to get you hooked. Like they're like
yeah,
like
right.
Spies from like a drug company. They're like, okay, get these guys like pumped up for drugs. So I thought it was ironic because I'm like, wow, I spent so much time learning about the DARE program and I'm like total drug addict.
Right.
So just the irony of life. So yeah, I think and a lot of people get to that point where weed stops working. That's what it was for me too. I just couldn't get high. I would get paranoid, anxiety. When did you decide? Okay, Evan, You've been smoking weed for so long. You've been doing drugs. When is it? How? Why? I need to quit this. Or else my life's gonna go to shit.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, when I really got into opiates, everything was just really, that shit ruined my life in a very short amount of time.
Whoa.
And I think I was just so done with. I wasn't really suicidal, but at that point, I just didn't really care anymore. I was just kind of giving up on life. Um, I was still living in my hometown. I was at this point, I was like 24, 25. Everybody else was moving on. They had careers and stuff. And I was still like working in this restaurant, still getting high all the time. Eventually I realized like, enough of this. Like I have to do something different. So I moved to New York City. My dad had actually just moved. He was living in Alabama for many years. He just moved to New York City. And coincidentally, around that time is when I wanted to give up, quit everything, and just leave my hometown and leave it all behind. Moved in with him in his one-bedroom apartment, was sleeping on his couch, and that's where I finally got sober for the most part. And I was still doing maybe party drugs once in a while, but I wasn't using anything consistently. And that's when I kind of started changing my whole life around. Finally got a real job, and that was it. Drugs were kind of a thing of the past at that point.
Oh, that's awesome. And how old were you when you finally decided to kick the rock?
Yeah, I was probably like, I would say 25, 26.
25. Cool. Cool. Guys, I know a lot of you come to this channel. You're around that age, maybe in your mid 20s, maybe getting in your 30s. So it's never too late to quit. And I think I appreciate you sharing, when you quit. A lot of people, like, they'll come in. I was at 22. I quit at 22 and I thought it was too late. I'm like, oh my God, my life is over. I fucked my brain up. Did you have any of that, like, fear that, oh my God, I did some real damage to
Yeah.
myself?
I was really scared of that, actually. I really I thought there was some, real physical damage I did. And one point I wanted to make before I forget is that I really do think that you have to, like, sometimes you have to hit this rock bottom, you have to hit this low, and you kind of have to go through this period until you finally realize I just can't fucking do this anymore.
Yeah.
My mom really cared about me, so I had a pretty good support system, which I'm very grateful for. She tried we tried rehab. I just wasn't genuinely ready to give it up at that point.
Okay.
So it's important to know is to just, be patient with yourself. You have to really want it. And it sucks because some people, if you're into the harder drugs, you might not get that opportunity. Unfortunately, it's everything that's happening with fentanyl and everything. It's really disturbing. But I know your channel is mostly people who are into weed. But my advice would be is to please try to wake up, now, sooner rather than later, especially you younger guys. You have a whole life ahead of you. I'm so glad that, everything turned out the way it did. So, just remember that it really only gets worse for the most part.
Amen, brother. Amen. That's gonna make a great short. What? How did? So they say that in recovery groups, just like you said, like it's recoveries for people that want it, not for those that need it. Obviously, many people need it. What made you want it finally? Let's say, like, I want to do this.
Joel, that's a really good question. It's just something just wakes up inside of you where you just have this realization, almost similar to like when you have like a spiritual awakening. Like it's not something that you can force yourself. It's just something that naturally comes where you just realize like you have to stop. And some people, like I said, I mean, there was a period when I was trying like Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, and there were guys who were just quitting that were like in their 40s and 50s. So it really will just come to you, I guess, when it's supposed to, when it's meant to. My advice would be, if you're struggling with that, finding that reason to quit is to maybe find some sort of higher purpose in life, either your life purpose or even some sort of spiritual thing. It doesn't even have to be religion, just something. Just try to find something greater than yourself. And I
Mhm.
really think that if I had found that earlier, that that would have helped me a lot.
Oh man, yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Evan. That's such an important piece of recovery is that higher power, higher purpose, higher mission. I work with people on that in coaching, like how to find that thing that's going to motivate you to stay sober because getting sober to stay sober, like I'll be frank, is kind of boring. Like I'm not going to lie. Like,
Exactly.
I don't blame anyone who doesn't want to get sober. Just, oh yeah, I got sober. We really work on like finding, okay, why do you want to do this? Do you have relationship goals, career goals? That I guess you could say that that is a part of you too. So I like how you're saying find something a little more altruistic. maybe some sort of spiritual path, which is what we're going to dive into more as we continue this talk. Um, what was that for you? What was your higher purpose, higher calling?
Um, okay, so I got into mindfulness, right? And not only like was it just the meditation, it was just the whole like realm of spirituality. It was Buddhism
Mhm.
that I originally became really
Oh,
interested in.
love it.
And I just absolutely loved it. I loved I loved the philosophy of Buddhism. It all made so much sense to me. It really spoke to me. It kind of woke something up inside of me. So at that point, I just knew I was really interested in spirituality and learning about different spiritual teachings, which I never was before. I probably laughed at it before, at an earlier point in life. Um, yeah, so I was doing meditation regularly, learning about different spiritual things, learning about how to do all of this inner work. And then I think after maybe a year or two of doing that, it finally occurred to me like, all right, now I have to teach this to other people, you know?
Mm,
And I think that that was really like what really kept me sober was
oh, okay.
this is like the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, this kind of stuff is this is I think really think this is my purpose on this planet, probably yours too, if you're, running this kind of channel. Um, so I think our life purpose is always going to come back to helping other people in some way, you know.
Yes.
Uh, it might not be so obvious, but
Mm,
it's never going to be something that we just sit in our room doing. Like if your life purpose is art,
yeah.
you have to give that back to the world. You have to design art that's going to help people in some way, maybe inspire them, maybe invoke
Mm,
some sort of emotion in them. It's not going to be you just sitting in your room drawing. So
yeah.
I think you really truly realize what your life purpose is once you start sharing it with the world, or at least
Mm.
realize that you're supposed to share it with the world.
Dude, absolutely, brother. It's again coming back to recovery, and I'll just keep touching on that point.
Mhm.
Service is one of the three pillars of recovery in those groups. I can't say them by name, but you know what they are.
Mhm.
Um, those recovery pillars, and a lot of people with addiction problems, unfortunately, this is not a good or bad thing, as they say in Buddhism. Just is there's a lot of self-centeredness, and I believe that comes from trauma from the past. Mm, I know for me, it was not feeling safe. So I had to go inwards. And therefore, I was always trying to protect myself. And when I got older, that manifested into self seeking, self serving, self centeredness. And so a big thing for me was getting out of that. And service is a great way to do that. Right? I think it keeps a lot of people sober. It sounds like it did for you as well,
Yeah.
because you realize that, okay, I'm not super important as I think I am. Two, you get to experience what it feels like to give back to another person, because let's be honest, like once when you open yourself up to life, it gives you a lot. We got life to begin with. Like that's a pretty amazing thing. So it can start with little things, right? Like in meetings, just picking up my sponsor anyway. He's like, okay, so start picking up chairs and books after the meeting. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this. It's like, okay, I'll do it.
So
And then it just
I just want to ask real quick. So you were involved in the NA thing, or what?
I went to basically what you're talking about, but in for marijuana and then alcohol. So the alcohol group.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I I didn't. I wouldn't say I had a huge problem with alcohol. It was like I did because I would get in trouble and stuff. But
Mhm.
marijuana was my main vice. But
Mhm.
because there's only a small amount of people in that marijuana support group, I went to the alcohol one.
Oh, okay.
And my sponsor there also was a marijuana guy, but the group was so small, I had to get recovery elsewhere.
Mhm.
So starting off with little things, right? Picking up chairs, doing books, and then eventually it evolved into being of trying to be of greater service. Uh, I think absolutely, if it wasn't for this channel, who knows if I would have stayed sober. I know though that I can't relapse, or else this channel is kind of a mute point. So it keeps me sober for sure, and it sounds like you did as well. Um, what were some of those other things that kind of motivated you to so it sounds like service was a big one this channel, and then what were some of the other things that really kept you going and lit your fire, like this is something worth getting sober for?
I think just realizing how good I felt when I was sober, really
Mm,
healing all of that trauma and that depression and anxiety and overcoming that naturally, like I mentioned earlier, like I realized the only reason I was getting high all the time was because I was trying to escape myself from that. So once I just sat
mhm.
there and, through meditation, different meditation techniques, and really faced all of that, I was like, oh, life is actually so much more enjoyable when you're sober.
Right.
Um, but the reason that I never, like when I was going through the whole drug phase, the reason I never was able to stay sober for a substantial amount of time is because I didn't enjoy it. Like you said, it felt boring because I still had a bunch of
Mhm,
mental issues that I wasn't dealing with. But once I finally
mhm.
healed those, healing trauma is, I think, is always going to be a big part of recovery. Uh, Once I healed all of that, I realized like life is not that bad. It's not, life is actually really beautiful when you
Yeah.
change your perspective. So
Yep.
I think just generally realizing, I mean, it sounds a little corny, just realizing how great life actually really is, uh,
Ooh, wow, I
kept
love
me
that.
sober. What do you think?
How long did it take you to hit that? That's what I think. What do the people want to know, dude? I'm in the withdrawal. When?
I would say, I mean, I think everybody's biology and it's going to be different for everybody, but I would say after a couple of months of doing a lot of deep inner work,
Mm,
maybe even less than that. I remember when I
cool.
first consistently started meditating every single day, I really noticed an improvement in the way that I felt after maybe 2 weeks.
Oh,
I noticed a little bit of, I was like, there's definitely something here. It wasn't easy. Meditation is really challenging when you first start doing it, but
yep.
gradually, just like going to the gym, you don't notice a difference in the first week or two, but you might feel a little
Yeah.
bit better after a
Uh-huh.
month. You look in the mirror, you see a little bit of a difference. I would say it's very similar to that. So
Oh, yeah. Great analogy. You hear
yeah.
that, guys? 2 months. You work hard. Can just take a couple months. No excuses. Yeah, I think I found about it at the 2 month mark. I was ready to move on with my life and stuff. And then Buddhism, I want to touch a little bit on that. I think that's really cool. You got into it. I had that same draw to Buddhism. I love that it talks about how you can find happiness today, not when you're dead, which is what my Christian upbringing kind of told me. Like, when
Right.
you die, you'll go to heaven, then you'll be happy. I'm like, I want heaven now. I'm an addict. I
Exactly.
want it now. What else about Buddhism drew to you? Just give me
The thing
truths.
that woke me up the most with Buddhism is because most of my problems dealing with depression and anxiety. Depression, your head is mostly stuck in the past, and anxiety, your head is mostly stuck in the future, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started learning about Buddhism and overall like what Buddha really taught was that you can only ever be happy in the present moment. The past and
Wow.
the future are just thoughts in your mind, and
Ooh.
you can literally just change your perception and be happy right now. You do this by practicing gratitude, by just enjoying the moment. Uh, and this is for a lot of you guys who might not be familiar with this, then this might sound like nonsense. You might not understand, but I do think once you start meditating regularly, you'll start to see because our brain is so conditioned to being to
Mhm.
constantly ruminating about the past or to constantly fantasizing or worrying about the future. But when you really sit down, and this is what mindfulness meditation does, or other like all of the meditation practices, it literally trains your brain. It literally rewires your brain to just be in the present moment. And I think that's that was the main thing with Buddhism that I realized like, wow, they're right. Everything they preach is right. Yeah, I mean, I also have a lot of gripes with Christianity as well. I grew up going to Catholic school. It's just not for me personally. I really like Eastern philosophies. I think they're really inspiring, really amazing. So yeah, I had that same experience.
You are like my white brother. Seriously,
Yeah,
my
I
white
know. I
brother.
feel like we're so like, everything you're saying. I'm like, wow, I had that. I think the same thing.
Right? You just got the beard, and but besides that, we got the white shirts.
You got the
It's
white
funny that
shirt,
you.
your hair, like
Yeah, yeah. It is funny that you're wearing your shirt says Bong on it. I know it's Billabong, which is like a skater brand, but
it is
I
kind
just
of
got a kick
ironic,
out of that.
right?
I was like, perfect. We just got to paint it green now. Um, yeah, dude. Eckhart Tolle says that he was the first guy I got into, and he's
Me
just
too.
you never. Yeah.
I read well, there was the book by Thich Nhat Hanh, but then after that I read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, nice,
And
nice.
that
Okay.
completely like that is what really I completely forgot that. And sometimes it's hard to remember like the sequence of events. That was the book
Mhm.
that literally like just opened everything for me.
Bro, amen, dude. That is what a book, dude. Guys, check that book out if you want to just trip yourself out and find a new reality, a new earth. Power Now was the first one I got into,
Most
and
people
I
start
found
with this one.
yeah, I found way more though benefit from a new earth once I found that eventually. I found power than I took it too literally because I was like they said like time. He says time doesn't exist; it's an illusion, which is true, right? It's all a construct in our head because the only thing that exists is the present moment. So I took that literally and just
Yeah.
stop like showing up for things and people like on time. They'd be like, "Dude, you're so fucking late all the time." I'm like, "Dude, there's no time. I can't be late." Bro,
I
you got
think
to be on time. Come on.
I think when you go through that phase of spirituality, whatever it is you get into, you will take a lot of it very literally but you still
Mm,
need to live your life practically. It's not, you're supposed to sort of just
okay.
apply it to your life. But I did the same exact thing, and I would go around preaching
Yeah.
all this shit, like time doesn't exist. It's not meant to be taken like so literally, but it really doesn't if you think about it. I mean, what is time? It's just something we invented as humans. I mean,
God, that's trippy. Yeah,
yeah,
it doesn't fucking exist. Amen. Yeah, it's hard not to want to share it with everyone. Like, God, I found all this this new stuff. Oh, God, pun intended. Like everyone, I found all this new like stuff. I remember just telling my parents, and they just be like, "All right, well, our son's gone off the rocker." I'm like, exactly. That's the point. I've woken up, and they're like, I would try to get people to hop on board, and they'd just be not about it. So that's I think a good piece of wisdom there. I've been like, yeah, I know that wasn't your intention with that statement, but do your best to keep it to yourself and let the results show as you become a better person, and then people will start to ask organically, like, dude, like, I see a lot of change in you. What is it? So when you just start
100%.
going 100%, because you just start going, yo, guys, like, look at this, you got to change because I did. People are gonna be like, fuck off. So,
It's the type of stuff that if people aren't ready for it, it's not going to make sense to them. Like I remember
mhm.
I read A New Earth and I was like, this is so amazing. And my mom bought it and she was like, it just sounds like nonsense. It sounds like mumbo jumbo. I just don't understand it. If you're just not there to the point where you're going to understand it, like you're just not ready to. And he even says that in the
Yeah.
book, like just put the book
Mhm.
down if it doesn't make sense to you. But my advice would be just keep an open mind to things.
Sure.
Like, there's certain books that I had to try to read a couple of different times before it finally clicked for me. So,
Mhm.
even if this doesn't, even if what we're talking about for you guys watching doesn't sound like it makes sense to you, just sort of keep an open mind to it is what I would suggest. And
Yes.
one day you might realize it, and then you'll remember that you listened to this podcast and be like, oh, now I see what they were talking about.
Yeah, those two ex-stoner guys aren't fucking nuts. Like, yeah,
Exactly.
right, absolutely. And I recommend checking out the Audible version of that book. That's how I found it because he narrates it, so you'll get to hear, and his voice is so like he's so present that like his
Yeah.
voice transmutes that presence. Like I think if I would have read it from the book, I would have been like it would have been in my own like thoughts. So,
Mhm.
so I think it would have been a little lost, but
Yeah.
um, so yeah, Evan, dude, I appreciate you sharing your story and kind of filling us in on your backstory, where you came from, how you got to this point. Now I want to open the floor up to you to just give us, everything love, and think about meditation and kind of enlighten us on what it means to you.
I think meditation is what it means to actually be alive. When
Hmm.
you're meditating, you are just experiencing reality. I mean, we put this label on it as meditation and we think of it as this practice that we have to do every day. I got to sit down. It's on my list. I got to sit down and I have to meditate for 20 minutes. I think meditation is so much more profound than that. I think you're literally experiencing reality as it is. You're not thinking about anything. You're allowing all of motions, all feelings. You're allowing everything to just be as present as it possibly can. I think it's so much more than just a practice or a technique. I think it's what it means to actually live and be alive. And I'm curious to hear what you think as well.
Wow, I love that perspective, man. And it made I agree with you. I never thought about it in those words, but as it's evolved for me as well, that's I think what it's turned into. It started off, I think, as most just learning like sitting there, right? Just okay, I'm just going to sit. And I thankfully one of the big things I learned was it's not about not having thoughts. I understand that pretty quickly, so that helped a lot because I think I would have gone crazy. Because a lot
Yeah.
of folks they start and they're like, "Yo, I need to like not think, and if I am thinking, I failed." No, 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 no. Like if that is your barometer, it's gonna suck. One of the groups I went to, it was actually a Buddhist recovery group through the
Oh, is it
Shambhala tradition.
refuge recovery?
Oh, that one's really good too with Noah Levine,
Yeah.
who actually got well. It's called Heart of Recovery with the different Buddhist tradition, and unfortunately, both of them got got shut down. Not the groups, but the leaders. So Noah Levine, and then the guy who's running the Shambhala group. He's like a guy from Asia for let's just say doing inappropriate things with students.
I heard that.
So yep, ironic, right? The most
Mhm.
spiritual practice. They're teaching about like sexual purity, and then they're going off and doing creepy things. So that was a huge ordeal, and that's when I stopped going to that group.
You know what's
But
funny? I want to say something real quick. Sorry to interrupt you.
please, please.
The guy who originally lent me the book, The Art of Power, the one by Thich Nhat Hanh, the
Uh-huh.
one that like really put me on this whole path. He later actually got. He was a coworker of mine who later got fired for sexual harassment. I
Talk
always
about
laugh
these
at
spiritual leaders,
it.
right?
But you know, it goes to show you that you could still fuck up even if you are a spiritual person. It doesn't, you know, we still make mistakes. I knew him. I don't think his actions were necessarily ill intentioned. It was just like
Oh, okay.
it was kind of
One of
weird.
those. Yeah,
Um, but anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick that I
for
just
sure.
thought that was
It's ironic, and those guys that were doing it, they were doing it intentionally though. So it was funny
oh,
because before every meeting, we would have a prayer like, "Hey, we're here to practice, presence, sexual purity." They're just like going around like, it's, "All right, guys, it's kind of weird." But full circle here, they talked about how the monks, the Buddhist priests, the nuns, all these people that just live for meditation, they can only
mhm,
sit still for a couple of minutes before their mind starts to wander. So as
mhm,
soon as I heard that, I'm like, all right, like I don't need to go for 15 minutes without thinking. That is impractical. So I'm just gonna sit and just breathe and learn how to connect with my breath. So that's how I started, just connecting with the breathing. Great place to start, great place to anchor. I can still
mhm.
today anchor to that breath if I want to, which has really helped me in a lot of situations. And then it's evolved, just like you said, to where meditation is an everyday thing. Like you said, like we're always meditating.
Mhm,
And that transition for me came when I started doing eyes open meditation. So I used to do eyes closed and just connect to the
mhm.
breathing. And eventually I'm like, okay, I'm really peaceful when I close my eyes. But if I'm driving down the freeway and someone's pissing me off, I can't close my eyes. Like I need to learn how to bring this into like the stimulus of the world. So
Right.
what kind of meditation do you do? Transcendental? What's your practice like and how has it evolved?
Mindfulness of the breath was the most important. That was the foundational one, and that's the one that I recommend everybody get started on because it's very simple. And I'll actually be teaching a free 30-minute meditation class at the end of April, which we'll give you more
Oh,
information on.
awesome.
But if you're interested in just an introductory way, it's going to be very simple. You can just listen in. I would say that sort of that, like you said, the mindfulness, like just following the flow of your breath, like in, out, and just doing that for even just 5 to 10 minutes a day, I think you'll see a huge improvement. There are so many different meditation techniques. There's, you can put your hand on your heart and just focus your awareness on all of your heart, on just listen, like feeling your heartbeat. You can focus your attention on a candle flame. You can focus, you can do something like a letting go meditation where you just focus on the emotions and the sensations in your body and let all of them go. You can do something like self-inquiry, whereas which you turn all of your attention in. I mean, I've learned so many over the years. My advice is to find the one that makes the sense for you and keep it simple. Like you said, it's not about, I got this wrong too. I was like, I have to stop thinking. You don't want to try to control your thoughts. You don't want to try to stop thinking. You just want to anchor your awareness to the moment, let the thoughts come. The idea is to just not engage with them. Um, you want to just really try to stay focused on some sort of like just anchor it to some sort of thing that's only happening in real time. That is the best advice. If you're very new to this, I would recommend just practice even just sitting down for 5 to 10 minutes without phones or anything, like just sitting down in complete silence. Don't even worry about meditating. Just I guarantee you won't even be able to do that if you've never tried it before. Like just sitting down
Totally.
alone in a room and just doing nothing, just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. Even that's going to be like you're going to start twitching. You're going to want to get up. Just remember, like it's a very small progression, and you need to take baby steps. We're not, it's easy for monks who live up, in a quiet ashram or a monastery in the mountains to sit and meditate all day. Living out here in the West, it's going to be more difficult for us to kind of train our brain to be in that present state.
That's a very important point. It's you can't compare with guys that just live in peace and quiet all the day.
Right.
A lot of people have kids. A lot of people may have crazy jobs. You live in big
Exactly.
cities, so it's a different beast. And I think it's still important, though, like you said, not to give up and to push. To work on it. It takes years. I've been working on it, coming up on 8 years now. So that was when I had my first meditation. So it is and I still got to work on it every single day. If I stop working on it, it I start to get a little, loopy. Maybe this is a good, I think, a podcast for me as well to maybe get into more of a formal practice. I've gotten
Mm,
the habit of waking up, not being on my phone right away, maybe just sitting, kind of just breathing. I haven't done like a legit like I'm gonna set a timer and then go into whatever lotus position for X amount of time. Just because I think I've incorporated it into my life so much,
right.
it might be helpful to try to dive back into that a little bit. So I thank you for that. And I want to know too, this is I think a really juicy question here. When you first started to experience presence, did it
Mhm.
freak you out a little bit? Were you like, oh, this is a lot?
It I don't know if it necessarily freaked me out. I think I understand what you're asking, but it definitely is something that I never experienced before when you kinda have, like, the spiritual awakening, you can call it, which is not a crazy, like, thing where God comes down and, shines a light on you. It's just as simple as realizing, like, "Oh, like, everything is just a thought in my mind." All of
Mhm,
my problems, all of my anxiety, everything that I ever dealt with was really just thoughts. And I think when you
mhm,
have this realization, it kind of brings you this sense of peace. And I also think, to answer your question earlier, I also think that was one of the things that motivated me to keep going with everything. Like, you just realize that most of our problems are created in our own mind.
mhm,
To truly experience like this state of presence, I think that happens when you can get into a very, very deep state of meditation, which happens after practicing, for hours. Some people get it early on. Some people it takes years. I mean, it'd be different for everybody. I wouldn't say I've had a couple of very interesting experiences while meditating, nothing too crazy, but just realizations, that are kind of hard for me to verbally explain in words. It's something that you kind of just feel, and it's pretty miraculous. It's pretty great. And I think that's just the human mind's way of evolving to a sort of a
mhm.
next level. Um, so yeah, what about you? Like, what would be your idea of presence? Have you experienced anything interesting, or did it freak you out?
It did freak me out. I was like, because I was so used to so much stimulus. I was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is like too quiet. Like, oh my
Right.
God. And then I think what maybe can be difficult for a lot of folks is that they are you have to face everything that you're feeling and your actual data, your experience. And I was not in tune with my emotions, so I had a lot of emotions that were just not pleasant.
Mhm.
And I think that can be what deters people as well. Now, the irony is that the more present you get, the less those emotional states are present. But if you're going through withdrawal, if you're having life situations, if you have trauma, that is going to be there, and the meditation actually might shine a light on it.
Exactly.
So meditation, I think it's very important to be careful with meditation too. Like, don't obviously do it, but just know, I think it would be wrong for us to say that some stuff might come up that might freak you out
Mhm.
a little bit. And so I think it's very important then to have like either a coach or a therapist that you can talk over those things with to face. Because if you're, sitting in the car and then you're like, oh my God, this happened when I was 8, you're just like, fuck, that can be dangerous, potentially to those around you. So finding a safe space, I guess, that's a little, cliche word at this point, but a legitimate, it's a place where you can feel comfortable enough to process what you're going through is important. I'd say presence to me now is it's just freedom from suffering. It's freedom from the mind saying this isn't right or that isn't right. The freedom from thinking that, oh, made this mistake in the past, or oh, I got this to deal with in the future. Uh, it's just peace. It's really just peace.
Yeah, that's
I
beautiful.
love
I agree 100%. Um, there was something I wanted to say about your last point, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, it's not to say that all of your problems. What I wanted to say was a lot of trauma may surface when you meditate. A lot of repressed memories may pop up, and you really have to relax yourself. Something that's really important with meditation is to make sure that you're always keeping your body very relaxed. We store a lot of trauma, a lot of emotions in our physical body. A really good book that goes into depth about this is called Letting Go: The Pathway of Surrender. Highly recommend it. That book is another one that changed my life. And so just be mindful of that, be aware of that. And like Joel said, I think therapy is great. A lot of men have an issue with it. I've saw a therapist. It was I did sort of like an outpatient addiction thing at one point.
Mhm.
So what happened was, I won't get into this too much, but basically I was clean for a really long time. I forgot to mention this to you. I was
Okay.
clean for a really long time. And then about 3-ish years ago, maybe 2, 3 years ago, I had to get my wisdom teeth removed and they prescribed me
Okay.
opiates and I kind of
Uh,
slipped. And I kind of had
okay.
a little bit of a slip up, which happens. That's normal when you're in recovery. So a friend of mine got really worried, and she tried to get me into sort of this outpatient drug thing. It was all online. It was
Okay.
all like Zoom sessions. So it was weekly therapy appointments, and then also it was like group stuff. It was based in California. I actually really liked it. I got a lot of value from it. I got a lot of value from the therapist. Things like that will work if you really truly want them to, and I did. So anyway, I do think it's always good to have somebody to talk to. Uh, somebody who's not going to judge you, somebody who works in the field of therapy, coaching, mentor, whatever it is to you, even maybe just a really trusted friend that you have good conversations with. Uh, I highly recommend that because stuff will come up, but it has to come up for you to really truly release it. Um, so I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, brother. That's a very important point. Yes. And be careful too. I think with therapy and stuff, I tell people this when I start coaching them that, hey, I want you to come in and come out as fast as possible, right? I don't
Mm,
want to, a lot of therapists, unfortunately, how to say it becomes their identity. So
right.
they, it can be almost codependent where you come to them. What's dangerous about therapy, I think, is that you come to them, you talk for an hour, you go into some of the deepest stuff you've probably ever faced, and then they're like, all right, see you next week. I don't like that model. And that's maybe one of the reasons I stopped therapy as well. When I
Mhm.
coach, I give people like I say, hey, you can text me anytime throughout the day. I'll send you a voice note as soon as I can. Like I want to be in communication with you as much as possible so you can process these things because we will be touching on some deep stuff. Uh, my therapy evolved when I finally started seeing therapists that were like, "Hey, man, yep, our treatment's going to be 3 months, and then we're going to send you on." And I'm like, "What the fuck, like, dude?" Like, I felt
Right.
like abandonment, a lot of
Yeah.
abandonment, and now I see now it was their way of saying, "Okay, we like, I don't want you dependent on me." So I really actually appreciate that. Now that I'm further along,
There has to
so
be a
just be careful.
boundary.
It has to be a boundary. Yep. And a therapist that doesn't have a good boundary is a dangerous therapist. So be
Exactly.
very careful with who you find. I find that women can be a little content to more fall into that category of, wanting to be with you for a long time.
Mm.
And that can be, and I found the men that I worked with are kind of like, all right, bro, let's like, let's get you going. So I don't know if that's just a general thing. Maybe it's just what my experience was. One of the therapists I had, she went through some stuff while we were working together. And at one point, I'm like, hey, I need to move on to this other therapy. It was OCD therapy. So whether
Mm.
OCD exists or not, I don't know, but I need to go and get treatment for that for a couple of years. And
Right.
she's like, no, I don't think you have it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I do. Like all my good friends tell me I do. I know I do. And she's like, no, I think you should stay with me. And that was like, I got a weird feeling. So
Yeah.
that was an example of her. She became maybe a little too attached as well. Shout out to you if you watch this. You were a cool person. Um, so yeah. Anyway, what's up, T Smash, brother from another mother? Good to see you, brother. And he's been on the streams quite often, so it's good to see you. And yeah, so we're touching on some of the fears. I think the spiritual awakening part. Like, we just touched on the deep stuff. So there's a silver lining to this, and you get to have spiritual awakenings. I'm not gonna lie, man. I think I'm addicted to spiritual awakenings. They're amazing. Just those insights of like, oh my god, like it
Exactly.
really is that. Like, and they happen as you're meditating. They'll happen throughout your day. Like it doesn't happen just during meditation, but maybe like you're doing other stuff, and it'll just hit
Mhm.
like a bolt of lightning. You're just like, oh, that's why. That's why I
Right.
behave like this. Or wow, you get to. So
It really
what
is.
is that like to you?
It
Yeah.
the way you said it, it's really a spiritual awakening is just an insight. I can't stress that enough. It's not necessarily going to be, although, certain sages and people who have been, you do like really intense spiritual practices might have
Mhm.
very crazy sort of godlike experiences. But for the most part, for us guys watching this, average people in the Western world, it's mostly going to just be these sort of little insights where you start realizing things about yourself, about your past, about the nature of reality. And it's going to be unique for everybody. It's going to look different for everybody. So mine, like my greatest insight was just that reality is only ever happening right here and now. Our opinions, our judgments, our beliefs, our whole life story is just thoughts in our mind, literally. The present moment
Mhm.
is truly all that exists. And this is a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around. And it's kind of a scary thing for a lot of people to wrap their head around. Um,
Yeah.
but that to me, I mean, yeah, a spiritual awakening, it's kind of thrown around a lot, but I think overall it's a very personal thing. And I just think
Mhm.
it'll look different for every person.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's gonna, yeah, hit everybody a little different. It'll be for different things. A lot of mine was about the past and how I behave. So a lot of my behavior I did not like when I got into recovery, and I could start to be aware of how I was acting and behaving.
Right.
And a lot of the insights were like, okay, this is why I do this. Like, it's not my fault. It's my responsibility to behave differently. But I'm not like a bad person for having acted like this. And that was kind of my like, okay, I'm a good person. Or whether good or bad exists, I'm not a bad person anyway.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it gave me a lot of freedom.
I think
Um,
with that too, you just realize like we're really just a product of our conditioning and the way that we grew up. That was a huge one for me. That's why I got into a lot of like inner child work, and
oh
psychology
yeah.
played a huge part. Um, you just realize that like the way that you are, like you said, it's not really your fault. It's just you're just reacting to the experiences you've been through. And you really just kind of however your parents or whoever raised you, it's really like whatever they did is how you're going to turn out. And it's
Mhm.
your responsibility to take accountability and say like, I really don't like that. My parents told me it's okay that I can steal from the grocery store growing up, or whatever trauma they or whatever thing they might have passed on to you. You kind of have to take responsibility with that, which is something a lot of people won't do because they just don't have the
Yeah.
awareness to. um, but once you wake up from that, it's actually not that hard to change. Like I'm a completely different person than who I was 5, 10 years ago. You
Mm.
just have to really shine awareness on it and just notice every time that it happens. Whatever your thing could be. It could be something as simple as when somebody talks to me, I can't look them in the eyes. Or it could
Uh-huh.
be something extreme like I, use women for sex. Some whatever the behavior is, you just have to start noticing it and say, this is something that I do. I really want this to change. Notice when you want to do it, notice when you are doing it, and it'll kind of naturally cure itself if you take full accountability for it.
Oh, brother. I just had a little insight there when you were sharing. So thank you. Thank you. I'll share with you after the show. Absolutely, dude, 100 shining that a light of awareness. I think that's a great way to sum it up. You just become aware, and then as you're on this path too, and you start to experience joy and freedom, you're like, okay, this behavior inhibits me feeling joy and freedom. So
Exactly.
I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get rid of it.
Right.
I would love, like, in a alternate reality, to just like meet like each other like 10 years ago. Just like if we could just snap our fingers just for like 5 minutes to see if we like what we were
Like,
like.
what would we even get along back then? Would we look? You know what I mean? It would be interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, we would be like, fuck this guy. Oh, fuck this guy. We just start like fighting. So cool, man. So we are entering the last third of our show. And what I'm very curious to get your perspective on is, how do you incorporate mindfulness and meditation and presence into two things? One, relationships, when you're actually engaging with a human being, and then two, on social media.
This beautiful, beautiful question. So let me start with relationships. It's very easy for us to just like I can just sit in my room all day and be alone and meditate and feel great. You're really going to be tested when you get out into the world and have to start interacting with other people. So when I
Hmm.
first got into meditation, it was coincidentally when we first had that COVID lockdown, the first one where we all had to stay inside. I had just moved into this one bedroom apartment by myself. So I was working remotely at the time. So I was basically just in here all day, like meditating and reading spiritual books. I did that for however
Sweet.
long the lockdown was, like a couple of months or whatever. And then I was like, wow, I feel great. I'm so, my whole life has changed. But then when I actually had to like go back to work, I had to start interacting with people more. I was kind of going down, I was in sort of a lone wolf path during that time when I was in here. But then I had to go back out into the world And then I was like, okay, people are really gonna test you.
Mm,
Romantic relationships, your parents, your family, they're really gonna trigger a lot of trauma in you, and it can sometimes pull you
mhm,
back down to your old patterns and your own ways of thinking. So you have to be very careful of this. Understand that it's completely normal, it's completely natural. But you have to. I can't really say how to maintain that presence and awareness. It's something that I think you have to kind of find on your own. But I do think
mhm,
the more that you meditate daily by yourself, it'll kind of roll over into your everyday life.
mm.
And then
Well,
social media, um, yeah, that's a
I
tough one.
while you think of that one, do want to touch on the relationship one because a lot of good points there.
Okay.
Can relate to that 200%, dude. Man, like relationships. Eckhart Tolle talked about it. He talked about how the story of the monk who spent years meditating in the ashrams of the Himalayas or wherever,
Mhm.
and he came back to planet Earth, and he went to the grocery store, and or it was like the DMV or something. He had to get his license. He was there for like 4 hours. He's like, I had not been that mad in like so many years. And it
Right.
was just like in that moment I realized, oh shit, being somewhere where I can practice meditation and spirituality means nothing if I can't do it in the real world. And like I'm being tested. So just like you said, I had been practicing meditation. I was kind of like you. I went to my hermit phase, as they call it. You
Mhm.
become a little bit of a recluse.
Yeah.
Pretty normal. Mine lasted probably a little too long. I did it for probably like 6 years, and then once I started dating, that's when it was like, oh fuck, like I thought I so grounded and present and like aware of myself, and I just hadn't touched on that part of myself yet. So as soon as I
Right.
started talking to women, I was like, oh, why do I feel like a little boy when I'm meditating? I feel like a powerful leader or whatever. I don't know, whatever ego thing my mind came up with at the time. But I was like, I'm the guy. And then all of a sudden it's like, dude, like I can't even like look this girl in the eye. I'm so nervous. What is up with that? So you're 100% right, man.
The thing you want to
Relationships will push you.
It's easy. I think Jim Carrey actually had a quote like loneliness gets addictive because you see how
Mm,
peaceful it is or something like that. But you want to be careful because I made this mistake too. I was like, oh, I'm just going to become like a spiritual sage and just be alone for the rest of my life because
yeah.
I don't want to deal with, that trauma and dealing with those people and the stuff that triggers me. We want to be very careful not to fall into that trap. That hermit
Yeah.
phase is good for a period of time, but it's not sustainable. You can't do that for the rest of your life. Um,
Hmm.
you gotta be okay with putting yourself in those situations. Be careful about who you put into your life. You don't want to just be ha- welcome anybody who you meet. You still want to
Right.
choose your friends and partners wisely, but you don't want to fall into that trap of just being alone all the time.
Yeah. I love how you said that loneliness can be addicting. And Jim Carrey, I think, went through a phase of that where he became too spiritual and he
Yeah,
started to become a hermit. He got the long, like hippie hair and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Loneliness can be addicting, man, and because you don't have to face those insecurities about yourself, the ways you show up in
Exactly.
relationships that people don't like. And every day I'm tested on that for sure. There's things I do today that I think annoy people, and I'm just like, dang, like, why am I doing that? And I know the more I keep practicing and facing it, it's gonna get better. I'll share with
Yeah.
you guys listening right now one of this, so like we're not just talking smoke. Like we're going through this. Well, I'm going through this anyway. I can't speak for Evan.
No, I am too.
I,
I still struggle
you're
all the time. I'm still, I still struggle to maintain a consistent meditation routine. I still struggle with my own insecurities. It doesn't just disappear,
mm,
especially at our
oh,
young age. It's a lifelong, it's a journey. It's a long process, but
I appreciate you sharing that. What are you like? You're 30, 29, 30,
32.
32. Okay,
What
cool.
about you?
29, 29.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we're
So
about the same. Yeah.
yeah, you'd
More or
be a.
less.
I always bring it back to like high school. So you would have been a junior when I was
When
a
you was a
freshman
freshman,
or a
maybe,
senior.
yeah.
Yeah.
Something like
So
that.
I was like, yeah, yeah.
Where did you grow up, if you don't mind me asking? What state in America?
Freaking Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin. Okay. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I was not meant for Wisconsin. I'll tell you that. What about yourself?
I've lived mostly over here in New Jersey, New York.
Ah, okay. You're
My
yeah,
life,
Jersey
yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
Nice. Imagine, yeah, it's a different beast over there. I can imagine with
You never been?
no. Mm-mm.
No. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I've never been to the West Coast. I'm actually planning my first trip to Washington State in May.
Oh, cool.
So I don't know what it's like over there, but I mean, it's probably
Yeah.
not that drastically different, but
Did Jaron encourage you to go to Washington? Because that's where he's
no,
from.
no.
No?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
we talked
cool.
about that a bit. No, I just
Yeah.
always wanted to. I always wanted to go to Olympic National Park. It's like a really big national
Ah,
park
cool.
in Washington. So
Yeah.
I'm actually going there alone. I like to take solo trips once in a
Sweet.
while to just be by
That's
myself,
awesome.
and which I encourage you guys to. I encourage you, if you're scared of loneliness, if you feel lonely, I encourage you to face it head on. You know, trying
Mhm.
to invite more people in your life isn't necessarily going to cure it. I encourage you to get comfortable with the loneliness, and you know
Yes.
that
Yes.
might look different for
And take Evan's advice and make sure you're not becoming addicted to it. So got
you.
to
Yeah,
have that balance for
right,
sure.
right, exactly. There has to be a balance there, but
Yeah.